PMR. Not the inflammatory condition, polymyalgia rheumatica, but Project Motor Racing could end up being the simulator of 2025. In this video, I'm going to give you some more impressions of this work-in-progress version of the simulator, whilst driving a little bit faster than the previous video and being distracted by a German woman. Of course, remember to subscribe so you can then unsubscribe when I say something you disagree with. Clicking the like button isn't recommended. And of course, thank you to all our channel members, donors, Patreon members, and everyone supporting us financially. We are very independent, and without your support, we wouldn't be able to make this low quality YouTube content. If you want to contribute, check out our links in the description. You will regret it. First of all, the audio is recorded from a microphone stuck in the headphones, so don't judge the sound of the game by the sound in this video. Secondly, as we said in the other video, the car's set up, how it's set up at this event. There's a lot of TC, a lot of ABS, generally understeery, and of course the hardware that we're driving on is stuff we're not familiar with. Believe me when I say using simulators at events requires a different skill set to using your home simulator, but it's one we're getting better at. As I said in the previous video, Project Motor Racing seems to have come on quite a long way from the last time we played it at the event in Zurich. The cars seem to handle a bit more stable, a little bit more predictably, a little bit less twitchy, and things like braking and other subtle aspects just feel a bit more dialed in. But what about the most important thing after the grass? Yes, the force feedback. What about that? Well, I have to say, it's actually getting pretty decent. I'd go so far as to say it's much better than ACC right now, but then again, so is pushing a brick along the floor with your forehead. I dare say it's even better than Assetto Corsa Evo, but that's supposedly going to change with that game's next update. And I'd even go so far as to say that it's actually managing to beat out R-Factor 2's force feedback in many ways. Though, sadly, it still is not beating the original OG Assetto Corsa. But who can and what can? When will that happen? Probably not in my lifetime. The main thing that matters is that this sim is going in the right direction, and I found at this event in particular that everything we drove was really quite drivable and really quite approachable. I know I keep saying it, but the fact that this is a cross-platform game is massively significant, because this is on an absolute another level to Gran Turismo 7, F1 titles, and even ACC that was obviously on the games consoles as well as PC. This could be the sort of next Project Cars 2 type situation. Project Cars 2 was phenomenal for bringing lots of vulnerable people into the terrible world of sim racing. This could do that again, but in a much better way. I find this a lot more enjoyable to drive than both Project Cars 2 and Automobilista 2. And actually, the more I thought about this simulator, the more it kind of reminds me of R-Factor 2. It doesn't drive exactly like R-Factor 2, it has its own quirks, it's its own thing, but there's something about it that sort of triggers the R-Factor 2 part of my brain. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think if you're a fan of R-Factor 2, you probably really quite enjoy how this drives and handles, and also how it feels through the wheel. Now, at the Overtake GG community event, which you can go to yourself next year, so look out for that, and at Gamescom 25, I had a chance to talk with the developers behind Project Motor Racing, and you can really see where they're coming at this from and what their focuses are. Needless to say, they are actually all totally mental. More mental than you would even possibly imagine, but in a good way. Like, they obviously abandoned Unreal Engine early on with this project because they were like, yeah, guys, we need to have triple screens, we need to have that run well, we need to have sharp graphics. They obviously focused on things like basic camera, car settings, immersive sound for what's going on underneath the vehicle, tyre skid sounds. They've obviously focused on sort of proper hardcore simulator stuff. In a sense, they've compromised things from what probably would sell the game more to your average console player to put more of that super nerdy hardcore simulator stuff in there. Now, how that all pans out in the final version, we'll obviously have to wait and see. As I always say, and we've done quite a few videos on this, often more complexity, higher physics rates, and developers going bananas on sim features doesn't necessarily translate to a better video game to play. But I think pretty much all sim racers just want the basics there. As I say, triple screen support, VR support, crisp graphics, good frame rates, nice audio. They're kind of like a baseline for sim racers that we just expect, but a lot of developers, especially developers doing simcade or cross-platform titles, often end up neglecting. And also it's worth saying that Straight 4 have their factory driver program that you can join now if you want to, where they really are taking feedback from sim racers, esports drivers and real-world drivers that they're then trying to incorporate into the simulator. We could have saved them loads of money. They could have just had the GMP, the Gamer Muscle program, and I could have just told them exactly what to do. Sadly, they want multiple perspectives and perspectives from competent drivers. Absolutely ridiculous. So, their heart's clearly in the right place, but unfortunately, sim development is worse than being waterboarded with wet concrete. So who knows what will happen in the final version. But it does look like the sim space is really hotting up towards the end of this year. We'll have Evo and whatever happens with that and where that goes. We'll have Rennsport and whatever happens with that and where that goes. We'll have future developments to LMU and whatever's going on with that. And then Project Motor Racing will enter the mix. It's going to be like a conflagration of racing sims. It's a heavenly situation for sim racing YouTubers that want to do comparison and versus videos with obnoxious titles. What a time to be alive. Obviously, this video would be terrible if it was just a GT3 car. So we're going to head over to the Porsche GT1 car. This time with the audio coming from a microphone placed in front of a speaker. Not ideal. Bear with it, because this was quite interesting to drive, as this vehicle is one of my most favourite cars in simulation. Specifically, this car in Assetto Corsa 1 is so fun to drive. Weirdly, it doesn't feel like the fastest of cars to drive, and it's not the most agile. In fact, it's a bit of a bloody pain in the arse to drive, but it kind of works. It's fun. It looks amazing. LCD screen, big LED light to tell you when to shift. It's designed for idiots, and because I am one, that's probably why I get on with this vehicle so much. Also, we don't have an outside view, but come on guys, GT1 and older GT cars absolutely destroy newer GT3 cars and hypercars and stuff. The insides of them, the outsides of them. What on earth happened to motorsport? So, with me being very familiar with this car in the original Assetto Corsa, and actually also in Automobilista 2, I have to say, this drives really quite nice in Project Motor Racing. I did find that it felt significantly heavier in Project Motor Racing than how I interpret it in Assetto Corsa and Automobilista 2. Now, obviously, heaviness of a vehicle can arrive from how the force feedback set up as much as how the vehicle's actually driving, but trying to put aside the force feedback feel and focusing, or trying my best to focus on the actual vehicle dynamics, it just had this kind of weighty inertia feel to the car. Like there's a mass to this vehicle, and the vehicle's mass is something that you then have to be aware of whilst you're driving it. And this is really what gave me more of that R-Factor 2 kind of feel of handling. With this car, it definitely has more of that kind of, when you turn, if you turn quickly, you can then finagle the weight of the vehicle and the car into a sort of four-wheel slide. But if you turn slowly, you will take the corner more smoothly. So you have that kind of optional dynamic of pushing the car onto all four tyres using the steering wheel, which I think you have that dynamic much more in R-Factor 2 than you do the original Assetto Corsa. It's probably one of the things I actually prefer about R-Factor 2 in some ways. And one of the things that I do think is a bit lacking in AC1, where I think the cars are sort of overly smooth and progressive in some ways. Don't get me wrong, in totality I'm an AC1 fanboy, but there's certain dynamics that come from R-Factor 2 that I really like, and that dynamic seemed to be apparent in this. And then compared to the one in Automobilista 2, this to me just felt a lot more convincing as a car. It didn't seem to have the insane throttle authority or the insane mega snap that you have in Automobilista 2 and Project Cars 2. So again, much more like R-Factor 2, but then maybe a little bit more progressive and smoother in some ways. It will be super interesting to drive this on my own hardware and with my own car setup settings on this vehicle. But it is really promising and I think really quite compelling to drive. And I'm going to have to reiterate, compared to other stuff that's on console, this is a console and PC game, this just Gran Turismo does not hold a candle to this. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this is received by the console players. Just imagine proper online ranked racing with these vintage GT cars. It's what I've been wanting for so long. We've been stuck with this stupid GT3 paradigm. I get it, GT3 cars are popular, people know the brands, but oh my god, imagine a proper, decent, large grid full of vintage GT cars with ranked racing. This is partly why I'm actually allowing myself to get a tiny bit hyped for this simulator. Now, we haven't mentioned it in this video. I've saved the best to last. With us obviously being a 5k iRacer, and that puts us in the top 5% of iRacers in terms of iRating and EPIN size, I will warn you guys that sadly the developers made a huge mistake with this title. Unlike iRacing, you can quite easily counter steer slides, hold slip through corners and induce slip without it causing the tyres to turn off. So, I mean, I brought this up with straightforward developers and let them know how broken the physics are in this title, but they weren't interested. They decided to go down this route of controllable vehicles that don't seemingly kill the driver out of nowhere. Absolutely disgraceful, I know, but you know, it's their game. They can do what they want with it. So, after this video, I do feel like we have put a little bit of coal in the hype train, and after attending this event in Gamescom and playing the game a bit, there's a little bit of coal in my hype train. I wouldn't say it's the freshest of coal, it's slightly damp coal, but by the time this comes out, it could be crisp, full power, nitrous infused coal. That's a real possibility, but we'll have to wait and see. Let me know in the comments section how dry and nitrous infused your coal is for Project Motor Racing. Give us a teapot if you watched the video to this point with a fish. Until the next one, guys, thank you very much for watching this. Happy tea drinking, take care, and goodbye.